Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be covering federal assistance for students. Some plans have popped up talking about student loan forgiveness or relief. Going to dive into a little bit of what has been done in terms of student debt and what has been proposed. So a lot of students were unable to receive the $1,200 Trump bucks or stimulus checks that came from the CARES Act, the $2 trillion stimulus package that was passed through Congress, because they might have been claimed as dependents still on their parents' taxes and didn't qualify for that payment. Now, I did make a video last week covering some of the federal assistance given to schools and grant money that could be used towards giving schools aid during these times. But it looks like on average, each student would only get a couple $100s from that grant money. This varies between school to school, but from the schools that I looked at, a couple $100s seemed to be the median amount for these student grants. So the question now is, what's being done for students, both current students who are in the thick of it, going to school still and trying to pay for everything, their school tuition and fees on top of just their everyday living expenses, as well as former students who may have accumulated student debt or have loans that they need to pay off, but are now struggling because of economic conditions due to rising unemployment or other factors where their income may have been cut. Now, I'm not here today to talk about whether or not accumulating student debt is a good or bad thing. That could be a discussion for another time, but just to see at what's being done to help this section of the population out. A lot of the attention-grabbing headlines that were associated with the CARES Act when it passed were mainly for the impacts that it had on improving liquidity by helping large and small companies out through action taken by the Federal Reserve, as well as the much talked about small business loans and paycheck protection programs, loans given to smaller businesses. And it does seem like the federal government and the Federal Reserve Central Bank is doing everything in its power to make sure companies and the stock market is being held up, making sure that companies have liquidity, have access to the money they need. We saw headlines with the Fed buying into ETFs or buying up corporate debt now, making sure that companies are able to stand still and remain strong through the coronavirus pandemic. But what has been brushed to the side are the millions and millions of students. Now, it seems like these large actions by the Fed and the government have been successful so far at maintaining liquidity, keeping companies afloat, keeping the stock market afloat for now. But everything else, it seems like it's been a show. Reports have shown that the small business loans have been a complete nightmare to apply for, with many banks running out of funds or taking extra time and not being able to process all the applications. We see even the unemployment benefits. A lot of state systems have been completely overwhelmed and unemployed workers are unable to go on and get their benefits. And with students, we see that colleges and universities receive a chunk of money for educational assistance, but once again, the grant money given to students is not much at all. Now, given all of this and the first, second, third round of stimulus, there has been a lot of talk now and momentum building for student debt forgiveness or loan reductions, payment protections. Different things have been thrown out there. First, I want to talk about what has been done. I mentioned in the beginning of this video, a portion of the money allocated in the CARES Act was given to higher education institutions, and some of that money is used towards giving emergency grants to students who need it the most. And the federal government has also stopped collecting interest on certain types of federally held education loans from March 13th, 2020 through September 30th, 2020. They will be collecting 0% interest on certain loans. Now, once again, this only applies to certain federal loans, and if you do have a private loan, those will not count as something that would be covered under the CARES Act. So it really seems like students and education has been really kicked aside. Having no interest for a couple of months is nothing compared to the amount of money that we've seen being thrown at the stock market, governments, and also the healthcare system, which arguably is really important during these times. But focusing back now to students, 4 years ago and even earlier when Bernie Sanders ran for president, talks of eliminating student debt, canceling student loan debt was floated around. And he's been talking about that consistently throughout both of his presidential campaigns. Now, his initial plan was to cancel all student loan debt for about 45 million Americans who owe about $1.6 trillion and to cap student loan interest rates moving forward at 1.88%. A lot of people saw this as probably one of the most progressive plans out there, which is where we're going to start moving from there towards some of the other proposed bills that have popped up in the past couple months. So it seems like since then, other people, Elizabeth Warren, and also the presumptive Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, has pushed a plan of his own. His plan would forgive all undergraduate federal student loan debt for certain borrowers. Now here the plan is a lot more restricted. It would only cover federal student loans for undergraduates. So if you're a graduate student or you've taken out private student loans, you wouldn't be covered here. Whereas in the Sanders plan, it would eliminate all student debt completely. But since the pandemic, a couple other versions have popped up. One being the relief for essential workers. This would offer essential workers a $25,000 towards student loan forgiveness and would qualify both federal and private student loans for this program. Another bill that's proposed, the relief for medical workers. This would provide student loan forgiveness for all frontline medical workers. And this would cover all federal and private student loans. They would be forgiven for medical workers, and there is no cap on the amount of money that could be forgiven. There are also two more versions of similar bills, both in the Senate and the House. The Senate version of the Universal Student Loan Forgiveness is pushing for government to pay up to $10,000 in regular student loan payment, whereas the House version of this bill would forgive up to $30,000 and private loans would not be eligible. So we've seen here a lot of different ideas and bills have been floated out there. Even the Democrats and House members have proposed bills ranging from $30,000 loan forgiveness to $50,000 loan forgiveness. These things change almost on a weekly basis, given the negotiation of what they're talking about at a certain time. But it does seem like this idea is gaining a lot more traction than it was before. Student debt has been a mounting issue for a while now, but it came really to the forefront during some of the more progressive campaigns that we've... Again, I'm not here to debate whether or not it's a good or bad idea to go out and get a college education or get a degree and have loans that you can or can't pay for after you graduate. But what we're talking about here is a problem that really needs to be addressed. It's not going to magically go away if the pandemic and this crisis carries on for longer than we anticipate, right? We see states opening up now, but what if there is a second wave and people cannot go back to their jobs? It's not just student debt we're talking about. Anyone with any sort of debt or payments would be put at risk. If you own a house, you have a house loan, or you have car loans or any other payments, if your job is in jeopardy or your income is being reduced, you're not going to be able to pay it. Doesn't matter how much companies or banks are propped up, at the end of the day, we may see another debt crisis or economic collapse if this situation isn't managed carefully. I'm not trying to spread fear and make it all gloom and doom that we're going back to the Great Depression. But these are issues that really need to be addressed, whether extending that interest-free payment period longer or canceling a couple months of debt right now so that people have some time to save up and get back on their feet. Because even if interest payments are suspended on loan payments, that doesn't mean that loan's going away. Right? If it's suspended for 3 months, at the end of those 3 months, you still have to pay up more, or instead of paying that loan over 10 years, you're now paying it over 15 years. That money is still being paid. Now, arguably, it could be seen as a responsibility, right, to pay back your debts. You did take that money out knowing that you would have to repay it. I'm not encouraging people to just take out loans on the hope that they would be forgiven. You should be responsible when taking out loans and making sure you can pay it off. But these extraordinary times do call for extraordinary measures. I just want to see the response to address these issues, more specifically the student debt crisis, when the Fed and the government has been focused on months on the market and for larger corporations. But this was just a quick recap of some of the proposed ideas regarding student loan cancellation, student debt relief. We definitely do have to wait and see what happens if any of these bills can gain enough momentum to maybe be put into another stimulus package or to be considered down the road in the next administration. But with a lot of this, we just have to wait and see where the virus takes its course. If we're able to slowly open up without a huge second wave, then another stimulus package might not be needed, and all of this momentum talking about student loan forgiveness might just be forgotten until the next election cycle. But like I said, if this doesn't go away as we think it will, we might be in for a rough couple months down the line or a couple years, just depending on what happens. But if you have any questions, any comments, let me know down in the comment section below. How do you feel on this? If you're having loans, if you're having trouble paying them back, if you think this should be a good thing to do or a bad thing, let me know. If you thought this video was useful, leave this a like, subscribe to the channel for more videos. But thank you all for watching. Peace out.